So now we're going to discuss the scenario planning step. So here are 6 steps of scenario planning process. The first step is to define the scope. The second step is to identify the major stakeholder. The third step is to apply identified trends. The fourth step is to identify key uncertainties. And the fifth step is to construct initial scenario theme. And the last step is check for consistency and plausibility. So now let's dive into the step one by one. The first step is to define the scope. Here what you need to do is to define the time frame and the scope of the analysis. When we talk about the scope of the analysis, it is in terms of the product, the market, the geographic area and technology. For example, if your company is operating at a very specific area only, then your concern of the scope is with respect to that area. And your product should be also the concerned area. For example, if you are into the technology sector, you should look into what are the key things that might actually impact your product line. And then when we talk about defining the time frame, it should be based on the rate of change in technology, the product life cycle, the political election, the competitor, the planning horizons, and so forth. So once you have identified, determined the appropriate time, ask what knowledge would be greatest value to the organization. What is the most important information that your organization need to define the goal of your scenario planning? So here the political parties, the elections will certainly impact your scenario planning. For example, if a particular political party gets elected and they are having different opinion with respect to the environment, with respect to the technology, so they might be impacting your decision making, your scenarios. So suppose that Democratic Party is getting elected, so they might be more concerned about the environment. So the rate of change in technology, if it is impacting the environment, it might not get that much attention from the government. The government may try to not help those technologies that are impacting the environment. So this is how you need to look into the overall overview of how the political scenarios are actually changing, and then look into the competition. Who are your competitor? What they are actually doing? What are the key knowledge that you can gain from the competitors? What are the new products they are actually planning to put into the market? What are the new innovation they are coming up with? So all these things you should have into your scenario planning scope. Also, it is useful to look at the past and think about what you wish you had known then and that you know now, what have been the past source of uncertainties and the volatility. So it is always a good idea to look into the past and to understand the key challenges, the key thing that got unnoticed from your point of view, what you should have done in the past to define the your future planning of your product. And if you have already got the knowledge with respect to your organization, you should also apply this into your scenario planning scope. Let's say you are developing a 10-year scenario. So what you need to do is to look back 10 years and look at the change that have occurred in your department, in your organization, industry, region, technology, country, and even the global change that you have witnessed. So for example, if you look into the technological development in the past 10 years, for example, in the network sector, in the 4G or the fifth generation network, and then the 6G network. So how the change has happened? What were the speed of the change? how faster the technological development has propelled the technology in the network sector. So this could actually help you to understand how the future will unfold with respect to your next generation of the technology development. So since the 5G network or the 6G network or 6G networks are gonna impact the development of the mobile network, mobile technology. So this is very important to understand how faster it will get developed in next 10 years. So suppose that currently last 10 years we have moved from the 2G or 3G to 6G, so we can anticipate the same level or the similar change will happen in next 10 years. So this is how you need to start looking in the past and anticipate the similar change that may occur in next 10 years. So in defining the future scope in with respect to your scenario time frame, the whole management team must participate in this part of the process. Their unstructured concern and anxieties are often a good starting point for your scenario planning. So this is our first step in defining the scenario planning. Next step, we're gonna move into our identifying the market and the consumers. In our next step of the scenario planning is to identify the market and the consumer. So here what we need to do is to identify the key stakeholder, those who will have the interest in these issues that you are trying to identify through your scenario planning. So here what you need to understand, who will be affected by them, who could influence them, and the obvious stakeholder that include the your consumers, your supplier, your competitors, your employees, the shareholders, the government, and so forth. So what you need to do is to identify their current roles, their interests, and the power position, and ask how they have changed over time and why. For example, in the environmental area, the judges, scientists, lawyers, journalists, and regulators are the most important powerful stakeholder. For example, if the journalists are writing on something related to the environmental area, so this could impact the overall your scenario planning. So suppose that they are writing some bad news about the environmental issues, and your company is connected to that environmental related problems. For example, if your company is hurting the environment, producing the pollutions, emitting the greenhouse, so this could actually cause the problem for your market. And if the judges are also concerned about the environment related issue, so they might pass a new legislation that will certainly impact your scenario planning, that could further cause the uncertainty in your scenario planning. And if a scientist is coming with some new technology that might help this environment, so this could actually help your business as well. So you need to look into all those stakeholders, their power position, how powerfully, how impactful they are in your business, and you must consider those important stakeholders and the market and the consumer. Now, our third step in scenario planning is to apply the identified trend. As we have already discussed about the our trend canvas, so what we need to do is to apply the identified trend from our trend canvas. In our trend canvas, the multidimensional framework, we have identified multiple major macro trend associated with your industry, organization, or the product. So suppose that you are building a trend canvas with respect to your industry. So you need to look into what are the key micro trends that are emerging. So suppose that you are working in the technology sector, in the environmental sector, or whatever the sector you are working. So you need to put all the trend with respect to your particular sector, with respect to your organization that you're concerned about. So once you have done that identification of the trend from your trend canvas, next step is to look into what political, economic, societal, technological, legal, and industry trends are sure to impact the issue you have identified in your step number one. For example, a company concerned with the future of environmental issue might identify trends such as the increasing environmental regulation, the continuing growth of environmental interest groups, then the scientific advances in molecular biology, and an increasingly liberal judiciary due to democratic precedent. And then what we need to do is to briefly explain each trend, including how and why it exerts its influences on your organization. It may be useful to list each trend on a chart, also called the influence diagram, to identify its impact on your present strategy as positive, negative, or uncertain. So, everyone participating in this process must agree that these trend will continue. Any trend on which there is any disagreement, there is a confusion, you need to move to the next step of identifying the key uncertainty with respect to your organization. So this is all about our trend identification. Here what you need to do is to look into our trend canvas. Let me show you how you can look into your trend canvas again, so that you can understand how to identify the trend and how to look into the political concern or the environmental, economy, or societal concern. Let's look into now. So what we need to do is, based on the identified trend, look in your trend canvas to identify the trends with respect to your industry. So suppose that here in this trend canvas, we have a trend related to the health industry. So from here, you will identify the multiple trends in your four dimensions, like your from the scientific, social, economy, emotional, and spiritual dimension. And then from the structural driver, that is quality of life, universal awareness, that we have already learned about in our trend management framework. So here what you need to do is to identify the those trend and map it, filter it out based on the who will be responsible to impact your identified trend. For example, the government, the politics, and so forth. So here you can look into the current scenario in the politics and legislation, and look into how these trends will be impacted by the politics and legislation. So now after this, we're gonna move into our fourth step of scenario planning to identify the uncertainties, where you have uncertainty among your managers, your team members. So the next step is to identify the uncertainties in your scenario planning. So far, we have applied the trends in our scenario planning. We have also talked about how to extract the uncertainties, the certainties, the positive influence of those trends on our scenario planning, and the negative influence on our scenario planning. So now in next step, we're gonna work on to identify the uncertainties with respect to your scenario planning. So our fourth step is to identify key uncertainties. So when you are looking to identify the key uncertainties, you need to think of what events whose outcomes are uncertain, what will significantly impact the issue you are concerned with. Your organization might be looking to get the answer. Your organization may not be sure about the future with respect to a particular uncertainty. Again, consider the uncertainty with respect to economy, politics, societal influences, technology, legal, and industry factors. When we talk about the industry factors, the industry related uncertainties for your business. For example, if you're working in a technology industry, then you need to identify that upcoming the emerging trends in your sector, and how these trends will impact your business direction with respect to your scenario planning. For example, when we talk about the politics related influences, the uncertainties, will the next US president will be from Republican or Democrat? What will be the legislation? Will the particular legislation will be passed or not passed? Will a new technology will be developed or not developed? What will consumer value in the future? Will they value price or service? So there are so many questions that you need to find the answer of those questions. And again, it's best to keep the outcome simple with a few possibilities at most. You may also want to identify relationship between those uncertainties. For that reason, you can build your uncertainty correlation or uncertainty matrix. Since all the uncertainties may not occur at the same time, may not work at the same time. For example, if one economic uncertainty is level of unemployment and the other is level of inflation, then the combination of full employment and zero inflation may not be a possible correlation with those uncertainties. So now let's look into the with the practical example how you can work with your uncertainty matrix and how you can build your uncertainty diagram. So now let's look into the uncertainty matrix for the advertisement agency. So before we move to understand how this uncertainty will work for the advertisement agency, let's first try to understand how this matrix work, how this uncertainty matrix gonna help you. So on the left and right side, we have the factors that are responsible for the uncertainty, and on top and the bottom we have the level of the uncertainty. For example, on the top we have the high level of uncertainty, and at the bottom we have the low level of uncertainty. So now let's look into this uncertainty matrix for the advertisement agency. So as you could see, we have the uncertainty connected to the technology, and on the right side we have the uncertainty connected to the politics. So what you need to understand, you need to identify the key news, key factors, key ideas that are coming through the various channels. For example, if there is some new news that you have just spotted, so you could actually look into what are the some trends that is connected to either the technology or through the politics. So based on those key drivers of the change, the technology, you may look to find the important ideas, important news connected to this particular technology sector. So for example, in the technology sector, there is a rise of the metaverse. So we are keep on listening, keep on seeing the news connected to the metaverse, that how this gonna change the people's life, how people will use the metaverse in the future. So certainly this metaverse technology gonna impact our lives, as well as how the advertisement agency serves the advertisement to you. So this is also the opportunity to present the new advertisement through the metaverse. So the number one uncertainty that is high level of uncertainty U1. The question arises, will rise in metaverse will impact the advertisement agency, and how this gonna impact. Then at the bottom U1, will the evolution toward a global borderless civilization continue? So as we have already started to witness that the people are now connected globally more than before, and the rise of global citizenship or the rise of global citizens are increasing daily. People are connected to the world. People from India to west to India and China and other part of the world. So now, will this evolution toward a global borderless civilization continue, and how this may impact the advertisement serving to the consumers? So since consumers are getting more global, they are getting exposed to global culture. So how this will actually impact the actually how this will impact the advertisement agency? Then you too, will artificial intelligence will impact the advertisement generation? Since there is a rise of artificial intelligence, so as people are started to using the more AI related writing stuff, for example, now the AI is for example, there is new generative AI. So generative AI is responsible for generating the new idea, the new concept, the chat GPT. We are already witnessing how this has changed the way we used to write the contents. So this is how you need to look into the impact on our advertisement agency, the advertisement writing, how this chat GPT will help us to write the ad slogans, the advertisement articles, the content, and many other stuffs. Then, when we talk with respect to the politics, how this advertisement agency will get impacted. So, the U1 is, will the government allow in-house advertisement? And then the U1 connected to the low level of uncertainty, will the client's advertisement expenses remain fully deductible on tax returns? So suppose that the political party is now putting a lot of tax on the client's advertisement expenses. So will be the tax deductible, or tax return will be, or the client will be able to file the tax return? So this is how this the new laws that is getting passed from the government gonna impact the advertisement agency as well. So suppose that now, let's look into the another example connected to the legal and then economy. So again, on the top you have the high uncertainty and the bottom low uncertainty. So when we talk about the legal, will there be a new legislation impacting the advertisement agency will be passed, and then will a particular kind of ads will be banned by the government, or there will be legality connected to that ad, or will the alcohol ads will be banned? Or you can also look into, will a particular kind of ad could be served, for example the advertisement related to kids in the advertisement, will they be allowed or not allowed? How this gonna impact the advertisement connected to that? So far, we have to look into the many other aspects connected to the legal aspect of the advertisement, and then what you need to look into the economy. So high level of uncertainty is connected to, will the economy improve or decline? And when we talk with the level of uncertainty, will the new government policy help the advertisement agency? Will economic support will be provided or not provided? So this is how you can go with the legal and then the economy and the high and low level of uncertainty. Similar way, you can also work on the societal and industry related trends. So industry related trend connected to the your advertisement industry related trend, and then the societal trend. So now let's look into the our influence diagram. So this is our influence diagram. On the left side, you have the time frame that you may decide based on your organization or your product level planning, or you already understand your product life cycle. So based on the product life cycle, your organization's life cycle, you may decide your time frame. Then the trend connected to your organization and the uncertainty connected to your organizational trends. For example, if there is a trend one, then there might be uncertainty connected to that, and then based on those uncertainty, you may plan your scenario dimension one. And then the same trend is also connected to the trend three. So trend 1, trend 3, they are actually connected. And then what you need to look into the uncertainty connected to these trends. And then also the trend 3 is getting impacted by the uncertainty number 1, and again the trend 2 is also getting impacted by uncertainty 5, uncertainty 2, and based on those uncertainty levels we have the scenario dimension 2. Again, you could see this uncertainty, this trend is also connected to uncertainty 3, uncertainty 4, and uncertainty 5, and these uncertainties accumulating together to bring up the final scenario dimension 2 as well as scenario dimension 1. So what you need to do is to build your uncertainty diagram, measure all the uncertainties, filter out your trends with respect to the all the uncertainties connected to your organization level. So let's look one of the example connected to this influence diagram to understand it in a better way. So this is a one of the our influence diagram for the industry mobile technology, the growth of the mobile users, and this particular trend we call the mobile millennials. Mobile has transformed our life. People are connected to the mobile at a very regular level. Based on the recent data, it's found that people are using mobile at least 6 hours a day. You can understand that this penetration of the mobile technology in our life is unstoppable. So now let's look into our industry mobile technology, and the time frame is 5 years. So the first trend that we have already witnessing is the rise of online meeting users, and then there is also this trend is connected, and then this trend is also connected to trend 3, the short video creators, and we have the uncertainties connected to the online meeting users is rise of metaverse, and then the uncertainty related to the 6G and 5G innovation, and then global neural network. Again, there is a new trend that is chat GPT, trend 3. This particular trend is again connected to our uncertainty global neural network. So after accumulating all these uncertainties, will we filter out the scenario dimension to further understand how this particular, how these uncertainties gonna impact our future scenario after 5 years. So all these uncertainty should be measured under the time frame of 5 years to better understand how this scenario will be formed, how these scenario themes or scenario dimensions will be developed after 5 years. So as you could see, after calculating, after understanding the people's life, the consumer's life, we can finally get to understand the scenario dimension 2 or scenario theme 2, that there will be a rise of global bots, global chatbot or global bot chat network, and then work from internet home. Then the scenario dimension 1, metaverse in online meeting, no office work culture. So this is how the future is getting developed. People might not find it useful to go at the office and work at there, but rather than working from home will be appreciated by the employees or the consumer. So this is how you need to look into our uncertainty matrix and the uncertainty influence diagram. So now we're gonna start working on our initial scenario themes. So as we have already discussed, after completing the overall uncertainty influence diagram, the final result is our uncertainty theme. So let's look into our next step to develop our scenario themes. So we have just discussed about our scenario uncertainties There we have covered our uncertainty matrix and the uncertainty influence diagram. Now the next step is to build your initial scenario themes. So while working at our scenario influence diagram, we have identified the scenario dimensions, the scenario dimension 1 and the scenario dimension 2. Yes. So these scenario dimension 1 and scenario dimension 2 presents our initial scenario theme. So once you identify trends and uncertainties, you have the main ingredients for scenario construction for your scenario theme. So a simple approach is to identify the extreme worlds by putting all the positive elements in one side and all the negative in another side. Also, please note that the positive or negative is defined here related to the current strategy. So suppose that you have identified a positive scenario and the negative scenario. So positive scenario might be the scenario that will be beneficial for you, that is impacting your organization in a positive way. But there is also a negative scenario that is might be a concern for your organization. But this is very important to understand these negative scenario identified during the process might be proved to one of the innovation and the hidden opportunity. So you must also consider these negative scenario so that you do not miss the hidden opportunities with respect to your organization and the product development. Then what you need to do is to cluster all the identified scenarios based on the your low continuity, the degree of preparedness, the turmoil, the risks, the opportunities, and so forth. And another method of finding your initial scenario theme is to select the top two uncertainties and cross them. This technique makes the most sense if some uncertainties are clearly more important than others. So now let's look these steps in our scenario influence diagram to further understand how you can start with your initial scenario themes. So as we have discussed in our influence diagram, what we need to do is to identify the most important uncertainties to build our initial scenario themes, or you can use our scenario dimension 1, scenario dimension 2 to build your scenario themes. So for example, in this influence diagram, based on the 5-year time frame, you can look these five uncertainties and cross them if they might be impacting your future scenarios. For example, the rise of metaverse is one of the uncertainties that might impact your business, your industry. So this is a kind of this is a kind of uncertainty that might be very useful for your business. And then you may also look into this uncertainty for the 6G and 5G. Just select them and utilize it for your future scenario theme building. Also, if you do not want to do that, just use the scenario dimension 1 and the scenario dimension 2 as your initial construction of the scenario theme. So this is how you can start working on your scenario theme. Now let's move into our next step. Now let's look into the sixth step, checking for the consistency and plausibility. So far, whatever we have just built, we have understood about the initial scenario themes. We have talked about the uncertainty, how to find the uncertainties, and we have built the initial uncertainties on our identified theme. Now it's time to further dissect, further investigate the consistency and plausibility in our scenario. So there are at least three level of internal consistency. The first one is dealing with the trends. Second, the outcome combination. And third, the reaction of major stakeholders. So let's check the first, consistency and plausibility. Are the trends compatible with the chosen time frame or not? For example, if you have selected a particular theme, we need to also look into if that particular theme is going to be relevant for next 5 year or 10 year, or based on your current time frame. For example, if you select for the 5 year, then will it be relevant for next 5 year or not? So this is why it's very important to also check this particular consistency and plausibility. Then the second step is to do the scenario combine outcome of uncertainty that indeed go together or not. As we have already discussed previously, full employment and zero inflation do not go together. So eliminate those possible pairing or scenarios. Then the third step is to understand the major inconsistency in our stakeholders. So are the major stakeholders placed in position they do not like and can change? For example, the Organization of Petroleum Export countries may not tolerate low oil price for very long time. So if your scenario will evolve, so if your scenario involves these stakeholders, so you will have to look into the consistency and the plausibility of these uncertainties. Try to describe this end scenario which is more stable. The stakeholder test is very critical when building your scenarios. The micro scenarios that involving the government, the international organization, the International Monetary Fund, for example, the World Bank, the United Nations, or strong interest groups like uh, the Asian Development Bank. So these organizations, these strong organization impact the overall future development of the our scenarios, inconsistency and the implausibility as well. So make sure they are not adding any future uncertainties. Try to analyze these stakeholders, their development, their new global plans, policies, to understand the upcoming uncertainties.